So to recap before the recording, this is going to be more of a history lecture style class rather than a particular pattern for any garment. So, okay, History 101 for Korean garb. Disclaimers. You will see basically a bunch of recreation attempts, and they're not perfect, and I will point out where I have noticed that they're not perfect, and you can kind of pick those out on your own if you can note like where mundane trendy color palettes are coming in, or makeup and hair choices on the models and that kind of thing. And sometimes the interpretations are taking art pieces literally rather than filtering them through a lens of like what people would have actually worn. Um, and then we're also, so I'm going to show the extant if I have been able to find the extant. And then yeah, we can assume undergarments, shoes, hair, and hats because I didn't go into detail on any of those, but there is going to be some pictures of them. And then note, because this has been brought up way too many times, that Korean garments are not copies of Chinese garments. They, someone just yesterday mentioned that they assumed Korean, like Joseon era Korea was basically DLC for Ming Dynasty China, and I'm like, no. They're, even though the clothing looks similar, like the sleeve cuts and like where the fabric came from or particular local preference of style, those are all different and they are not equatable. And at the end, I'm joking here, there will be a pop quiz of a bunch of screenshots from K dramas, and then you will have to, I will ask everyone to possibly participate in picking out what is accurate in those screenshots. A brief glossary. So, Hanbok is the name for the all garments overall. Oh, I saw my cat's tail flash in on my preview and I was like, what? But he is behind me. Okay, so Hanbok is named for everything. Hat, like just it means Korean clothing. And then joguri is like the top garment for women. I believe that's also the name for the shirt, the undershirt that men wear as well, but joguri is the top. Chima means skirt, and so that is any skirt you would see. It's not a specific type of skirt necessarily. It's just skirt. It means skirt. And then cholik is a, it's like a riding robe. It's got a top part and then the bottom part is like a pleated skirt or gathered skirt sewn onto a top part, but it's a one-piece robe and it's borrowed, or it's imported in or inspired by the Mongolian deal with the pleated skirt. And baji means pants, and chingyong means it's like it's a men's robe with straight sides, and it's got a Y collar. So if I say Y collar, it's like this where we go whoosh and whoosh. And if I say round collar, it's makes a round shape around the neck. And then so dalyong is a round collar robe. Gat is a hat. I'm not wearing one right now because I have a headset on, but it's gat. And then banbi is like it means half sleeve, and that's like a little overvest for women. It's like it's kind of short. It doesn't go all the way to the ground. It's like stops around waist or shorter depending on the era. And then the sleeves are like half sleeves because banbi means half sleeve. Dapo means coat, and that could be any kind of outer coat. Like this is a dapo, even though it's short sleeve. So dapo can be short sleeve and long sleeve. And then saguk is, I threw that in there because I use it as a term, but it's not really, it's kind of related. Saguk is the Korean, it's the Korean word for the historical like period drama genre. So saguk can be fantasy, can be everything, but it's anything in a period where it's a TV show filmed in period costumes or an attempt at period costumes. So I say, oh, like that's in a saguk a lot, or something like that, because that would mean then that um, it's just a historical drama. Okie doke. So I have a slide here that I have borrowed with permission from Lady Suyun of Meridier's that is in her Hanbok class, and she had here a good map showing like Silk Road trade routes, and so basically it just kind of shows you in relation. Mongolia is up here, and so and this is the rest of China down here. So the center of population for China is down here, and that's where the capital Chang'an was for a long time. And then Mongolia and other various nomadic tribes have always kind of been in these northern regions. And so you can see here is the modern outline of the Korean peninsula, and that is where um, so Korea is right abrupt a lot of these nomadic tribes, and so you can kind of see that in some of the influences in clothing. And then Japan is over here, and the line goes through here because here's where the center of population is in Japan, and a lot of stuff was transmitted through Korea to Japan, and it comes from the South Japan, and then the up here is more. There wasn't necessarily a lot of connection up there because most of Japanese civilization that Koreans were dealing with is down here. Um, and there's political strife there as well between like the very northernmost regions and ethnic groups that are up there, and then the ethnic groups that are in the what's considered the main island areas of Japan. So we're mostly dealing with South Japan, the Korean Peninsula, and then just be aware geographically of this area around here. Okay, my Discord notifications are. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. Because I set it to allow sound because I was going to play video. So let me just see if I can close Discord. And let me know if you still hear it. See if that fixes it. Because we're going to watch video later, and I do need the sound on for that. And I didn't want to get confused. Okay, so here we go. We're starting here with Goguryeo and Silla and Baekje and Gaya, and because as you can see here, I pulled this timeline from Wikipedia because it was easy. So we're not covering prehistoric period. We're not covering these ancient like Gojoseon and then like the three kingdoms of Gojoseon. And so we're not doing proto three kingdoms. We're just starting with three kingdoms period. Um, if you want kind of more information or context, there was a really good podcast I listened to, but I haven't seen a new episode of it for a while. But he was going through and explaining, starting with the Proto Three Kingdoms period, and then basically he explained that we have mostly a lot of records start in the Three Kingdoms period because the commanderies, I think it, yeah, commanderies. So there was four Han Dynasty commanderies up here in this area, and it like came down into the peninsula, and they tried to establish basically kind of like the Roman Empire had outposts in really far reaches. They had fortresses and outposts at some point in time, um, but it was a real frickin' struggle because Goguryeo they're kind of really metal, so they really gave the Han Dynasty outposts a hard time, and so so that's why we're starting right about there, because prior to that, these are just a lot of cultures that didn't necessarily need a writing system, but once the Han Dynasty outposts were there, we have writing systems and we have records from them about what Koreans were doing on the peninsula. And if someone reminds me later, I can probably try to find that podcast because it's pretty cool and pretty informative. So anyway, here's another map that kind of shows it better. So here's Chang'an, and here's where the Mongolian like nomadic tribes would have been, and then so this is kind of where they were in their reach, and and then we have, these are the Goguryeo tribes kind of up here. They they had like kind of range of all around these places. So that's why it's not like fully fully red over here, because they're they were kind of struggling for control out here in these commanderies. So it was kind of back and forth. And then here we go down here. So here's Goguryeo, and then Baekje is on this side, Gaya and Silla. And I think I have maybe another map when we get to those, but keep that in mind. So Goguryeo, the most historians put it at 37 BCE, before Common Era, and then it falls in 668 Common Era. We have a ton of tomb paintings. We have um, a basic. We're assuming that the basic silhouettes that we see in some of the tomb paintings were used throughout the peninsula, so I'm going to glaze over a lot of those because I need to do more research. And then at this point in time, which is important to note because this is something that is tossed around a lot, like you didn't have to do right collar in, left collar out, and then it being the other way around was considered don't do that because it was weird. Um, at this point in time, it didn't matter. You could put it either way. There was no taboo against putting it the wrong way. So here we go. We have this here on the right is from the Susanri tomb. It is dated to the second half of the 5th century, and then the Anak tomb number 3 is dated to 357. And these are both very uh, north of the peninsula, so kind of in that Goguryeo area. Because, like I said, this was the largest kingdom in this time, and they had this culture of tomb murals. So the two murals, these are both the madams of the tombs, but they look vastly different, even though they're all only about like 100 years apart. But um, but this is where understanding that there were Han Dynasty outposts in the Korean Peninsula at this time really matters. So like this one here, and again, it's analogous to how the Roman Empire had maybe outposts in the British Isles. So you would have them set up, and there would be people, Han Dynasty people, there governing, and then they would, but the Koreans that were underneath them might have been wearing different clothes or just kept wearing whatever clothes they were wearing. Like, so there was some kind of assimilation, but also on the other hand, not. So like this tomb occupant would have been possibly someone who had made the Korean peninsula their home. They were a governor there or something, and then uh, when they passed away, they were buried there. They didn't get shipped back home, because I think the what I had read was if they were a Han Dynasty native, like diplomat, and they were just there temporarily as a governor, they would have gone back and then passed away in China. They wouldn't have been in the Korean Peninsula their whole lives. So these are people that are living in the Korean Peninsula that are buried in the Korean Peninsula. So even though they look very Han Dynasty in their clothing, and they might have been descended from people in that area, they are they're dressing more in this Han style rather than this other style here that we see. But that's why they look similar. And I need to have more research on that to give better context. But basically, that's the gist of it. So here we go. Here's that picture again on the right. There's a ton of reproductions of this dress. People really like it. You can't really see it when you zoom in, uh, but if you can kind of see it here, you can see little specks of gold leaves as the decoration, and they go down the front. Um, and if you look at one of the close-ups of the online, I think there's an online website for this tomb, and you can zoom in pretty far and see the leaf decorations. But you can see they're replicating it here, and they're doing a pretty decent job. And I don't know if this is the same garment, but two different pictures. But either way, um, there's tons of reproductions, And then you can see that it's the top, which I'm going to call a joguri, and then a striped skirt is the iconic look from here. But you can tell from over here they're just drawing lines on the skirts, so most of the interpretations are that they are pleated, much like Hanbok or Chima have been for a long time. And then these two here are Korean reproductions of that left tomb image. Now there's issues with this because as you can see these are drooping super far. Now if we go back and look at that picture, it's not actually drooping that far. This is like an artistic rendition of how bunched the sleeves were because it was desirable to have the kind of swoop shape, but someone in the reproduction team took it literally and made them these huge sweeps, which don't really work out proportionally. And if you look at Western or like other Han Dynasty tomb finds, you'll see that they aren't really that deep. The extents are only about up to here. And then yeah, so we've got some liberal fabric choices here, artistic interpretation, I'll call them, and then yeah, so they're not that great of reproductions. And then here we go, some more tomb paintings. These are the more iconic Goguryeo tomb paintings. They have all these polka dots on them, and that's kind of the polka dots and the stripes are iconically Goguryeo. And so we've got the pleated skirt you can see down here, and then the really long over top, and then you can see that they're tied in the back and just kind of tucked in. And these over here are dancers, and so they're letting their sleeves out really long, and you can see this guy here has some probably pheasant feathers up top, and then this here is on one of the tomb murals as well. And these are all from Muyongchong, and you can see down here it's in Jian City in Jilin province. So it's in modern day China, just across the border. Um, so yeah, we have the polka dots, really long overcoat, and the servants in the back. If it seems the women had skirts and the men had pants, but I don't think it was super strict. And we have a couple men on horseback here, and we have these pheasant feather hats. And since you can kind of see here that the crossover is very shallow, and that's kind of why the which way you put the collar didn't matter, because at this point in time it's probably just one width of fabric rather than like say my garment here, this would be one width and then they would extend more so it could cross over more by adding a second width of fabric. So here we have more repros. Again, you can see that the swoop comes down almost too far. Sorry, cat to banish. Okay, I didn't lose my audio. Okay, so this here, you can see that on these previous ones, see how this lady here had some shoulder coloring? And I don't think you can really see it in this picture, um, but definitely this tomb, and I think there's a couple others. The madam of the tomb has like coloration right here on the shoulder, and then I think a little bit of like upper arm stripe. So that's what we're seeing here in this interpretation. And then here's another interpretation of like that same one. And then in these two, they gave them crowns because this is kind of like an assumption of what they think the royalty would have worn. Now, sometimes you can see if we go back to, say, this picture, and I think I have another one above, but you can see that the collar is pretty even and it's just kind of crossed over. But artistically, some people interpret that as it being thicker up here, which it does look kind of thicker. So it's a thicker collar at the top and then it gets thinner. And so you can see that kind of here, and I think here is another one. See how it's wider at the top and then it gets thin. So some people are interpreting it that way. And then here's another one. I don't think I have a name for this tomb, but I do know it's a Goguryeo tomb. But we're using these like apron things. I'm not sure what to call them or if they have a name, but they're similar to these ones here with the swallowtail fluffs. But this one was just very simple, red and white. And then, so this, in this interpretation, instead of the collar going down, they saw the painting, saw the collar was just kind of like this. And so when they made the repro, they did this. But I think a lot of the time it's going to be an actual Y collar, but maybe the collar tapers off and doesn't really have a color changed border. Oh, and while I'm thinking of it, the polka dots, the theory here is, I guess, convenient you just asked, but I have read theory that this is shibori style. So this could possibly be like you would just knot a little bit into the fabric and then dye it like you would Japanese shibori. And they were thinking that it's that's basically where Japan got the shibori dyeing technique, was probably from Korea. And so we're, if that is true, then I think you could definitely recreate a lot of these outfits with the shibori. We did have like brocades at the time, but the shibori, I'm kind of a fan of that shibori style polka dot technique idea because it just seems fun. And I mean, shibori is not too hard to pick up, so I can envision early people's using that. Okay, so here's what I'm kind of talking about with these V-necks. So like on this tomb painting, which a lot of people take literally, they're just seeing this V where, you know, his hands are right here and they're not really seeing the V come down, but it looks very similar to a lot of the other tombs. Now this is kind of that more Han Dynasty style tomb. Um, and so the clothing in this are very Han Dynasty style, but again, we have the super low droop on the sleeves that people are interpreting literally. And so here we have a repro where someone just basically took that at face value and it's like, oh yeah, it's long, it's drooping, it's just a V-neck. That's how it is, right? So that's a repro. And then these two outfits over here are the same, um, are using the same extant as their interpretation. So this over here is also a maroon robe, and they're just thinking it just didn't cross or it was a low cross over. And then this one here even has a tie in the middle, which is an interesting point that I'll bring up later when we get to a different culture that ties. Sorry, another cat banishment. He's got too much energy. Okay. And then here we have another repro where they chose to go with this shoulder coloration kind of style. Oh, and here it is. So here's one where the tomb master is displayed, and his up here the collar is very thick, and then it goes down very thinly. So, and then again we have the ritual apron thing. And then this over here is a Tang Dynasty depiction of a uh, Goguryeo envoy to Tang Dynasty. And so this is through a Chinese lens, but you're kind of seeing some more visual motifs. And I can't remember, I think I looked into it, but I can't remember if this was created like immediately after the envoys were there, or if this was like, sorry, another cat. And so I don't know if this was created like contemporary with the event, so if this might, or if this is like was depicted later and they're just going off of like hearsay of uh, what the Tang artist thought the Goguryeo envoy looks like. So here's a interpretation of that. And then here we have just kind of regular people clothes down here. Baekje. So I am kind of not sure where the line is between Baekje and Silla, so I have a bunch of pictures of uh, Silla stuff that said it was Silla Dynasty repros, but not necessarily Baekje Dynasty repros. So I don't know if they like shared enough fashion that it was hard to separate, or what. Like we know that there's separate tombs and there were separate kingdoms, but I don't know if like the fashion was necessarily different because I haven't seen a lot of people try to attempt to kind of nope, I said that wrong. Baekje, yes, but there's another one that's a no. But anyway, so Baekje, we have Baekje, and ignore that. I'll we'll see here. So most of this is reconstructed from Buddhist mandalas. Sorry, um, Buddhist mandalas, and which are kind of like the artwork that hangs behind altars, and then tomb paintings again, and we have some extants. Yeah, we have some extants, and so I haven't taught this class in a while. So, and Baekje had a close relationship with the Silla and Kofun period Japan, which is Asuka and Nara. And so, according to the Samguk Sagi, Baekje and Silla sent their princes as hostages to the Yamato court in exchange for military support to continue their already begun military campaigns. So, King Ashin of Baekje sent his son Jonji in 397, and King Shilsong of Silla sent his son Misahun in 402 as a yeah, my cat has way too much energy. He just wants to be up here on the desk with me. So yeah, that just kind of gives you some context. Like they're working together militarily, they're working together in alliance, they're trading. So they were kind of really close knit at this time. So here is one of the primary examples of what a Baekje woman iconically wore. And so these are there's a tomb that was found in Nara, Japan, and in the tomb, which is called the Takamatsuzuka Kofun. Kofun means tomb. There was like a tomb manifest of like all the things they had put in the tomb with the occupant. And so the manifest specifically says that they offered Baekje servants in the form of a mural to the afterlife. So these are specifically Baekje female servants in that tomb mural. And so here we have a Japanese recreation of that, but you can see that the waistline is like super super low. And then here we have low waistlines, but then it's tied up here at the waist. Now this is that mandala I'm talking about, but this is a Japanese mandala from about the same time, and this was commissioned for Prince Shotoku Taishi, I think. And then Taishi just meaning prince. And then, so this is 622, and it's kind of sort of around the same time. And you can see a lot of the similarities in like the shape here. So we're kind of assuming that since they were so close knit, that they were quite literally sharing fashion here. Um, so the line is practically not here when it comes to differentiating between Nara Japan fashion and or like Asuka Japan fashion and Baekje fashion. And so that'll require more study to be able to like kind of pinpoint the differences there. But so here we have a Korean reproduction of probably like this outfit here. And then here we have a Japanese reconstruction of the same outfit. It's interesting that they change where the center tie is. Like over here, they're assuming it's a side tie or a side neck, because over here it could be kind of a side, but then here it's definitely down the middle of all these garments. So that's definitely just something to note. And here we have in Nara, Japan, there's the shosoin, and that is a reliquary that I'm sure you've had mentioned before or heard mentioned before, but that is in Nara, Japan, and it was basically a bunch of relics dedicated to Prince Shotoku, I think, by his wife, and then they just sealed it all off and kept care of it for hundreds of years. And then, so what is in the shosoin is essentially from the time that they sealed it off. Um, and so here's some pieces that they have, or this is one piece that they have, where this is the skirt, and you sorry, and you can see here that there's like a flat panel that kind of makes it go longer, and then the pleated skirt is here. So you could presume maybe that in here, this Japanese reproduction, they're using that, and so I guess you would tie it up here, and it would be flat, and like you wouldn't have to use the fancy fabric, and then you would put the fancy fabric where it would be exposed down below, and then above that would be a pleated other kind of skirt or underrobe, and to achieve the tiered look. So it could be based on a couple of the artifacts in the Shosoin, you're probably just literally layering skirts of different lengths. So, sorry, attack of the cat. Um, so here's the Baekje Museum in Korea has put together these reproductions of Baekje clothing. And you can see here we've still got kind of it's supposed to be like, I think, king, queen, prince, princess, and then other, either maid servant or more princess, I can't remember. And then this is just some Baekje armor reconstructed. And so we have here, they did the super low kind of casually their skirt line. So I don't know if this would have been oh my god. My cat is trying to walk behind my computer monitors. Okay. Hopefully. Technical difficulties. Okay. If the camera falls down, it's because his tail hit it. Okay. Nope. Mm-mm. I don't have a door, otherwise I would banish him. But anyway, he's just trying to be annoying. Okay. I think he's content, maybe. So, yes. I hope that gave you ample time to look at this slide. So basically, these are repros. I haven't found a nicer picture, more HD picture, but they were going with that kind of shibori dye theory with the king's robe here. So they were trying to they reproduced this fabric here as if they were using dyeing techniques rather than a brocade. Whereas some of the stuff down here, like this is definitely brocades, which would also have been used. And here we have, like I said, their interpretation of the pleated skirt tiering system using some of. So this here is the vest she's wearing is what those that bambi is that I mentioned in the beginning. And this here is another Korean reproduction of a bambi that is in the Seoul Baekje Museum, but there are similar banbi in the Shosoin. Sorry. Okay, he's on the floor again. So anyway, we're here and I have more pictures. So here's some men's clothing from that same mandala. So the men are also having this low tiered skirt, but then you can see the pants underneath with a center pleat. And then this is a Japanese reproduction of this mandala. Here's another one. I haven't found a reproduction of this, but it was just a different man's outfit. And then here's some early 2000s attempts at the Baekje royalty, what the Baekje royalty would look like. But you can see it's just kind of cut and paste of what the Goguryeo outfits kind of looked like. Here's an envoy from Baekje from that same Liangjikgongdo, which is where the envoys are all depicted traveling to Tang Dynasty, China. And so here's two separate reproductions of this envoy's painted picture. And so you can see this reproduction interpreted what the artist saw as separate pants, as just cuffed pants, and then similar here, like this person actually put the emblems here and interpreted it as like a light green with the red, but this person said, no, I'm going to do it in blue and purple. But it's still the envoy. So it's just the top, pants, waist sash. And so we can kind of assume that either they're missing the skirt part, or or something. We'll need more information. So here we go. Gaya, here we go. This is the one that I kind of glossed over because Gaya is right here and it had a lot of impact armor wise on the Japan and Baekje and Silla dynasty relation, but it gets absorbed. The Gaya Confederacy kind of gets absorbed slightly earlier than the rest, and they get absorbed into Silla. So I'm gonna kind of glaze over them because I'm not sure where the difference is. So here's Silla dynasty. Here are their majesties of Trimaris, and then the lovely Song Myung-soo who made their outfits, and then they made their own belts and crowns to match their Silla dynasty style outfits, and I think they're super cool. So just put that picture in there. And then here you can see I have Silla as starting in 57 BCE and going to 935 CE. Now, Silla dynasty in that dynastic struggle does eventually conquer all of these. So Silla dynasty is hard to separate out because we have early Silla and then we have unified Silla is what we call the next era that we'll get to. So I kind of glaze over early Silla because it's kind of assumed that a lot of the shapes are similar to Baekje and Goguryeo. How are we doing on time? Oh boy. Okay, I gotta speed up. um, and so anyway, so we have a ton of like the metal work that has been excavated from tombs and like beads and stuff, but we don't necessarily have a bunch of uh, other things. So here's the beads I'm talking about. And so you can see they've got the Japanese word is magatama, and I can't remember the Korean word off the top of my head. And then we've got the lightning bolt style crowns, and then some of the crowns look like deer crowns or deer antlers. That's the word. And so here, all these reproductions with the cloth over the shoulders, that's kind of what I took as an indication that they're um, later Silla or possibly later Silla because that scarf over the shoulders is kind of iconically Tang Dynasty, and so I'm not sure when Silla fashion or how Silla fashion necessarily interpreted Tang Dynasty fashion, but there's a lot of online controversy about Silla Dynasty just being copies of Tang Dynasty fashion, and then people doing the lovely appropriating thing back and forth. So, here's pictures of reproductions. I don't know what they're based on besides like what I haven't been able to find basically the extants that they're basing these on. All I know is they're making reproductions that all generally look the same, but I don't know what the source is yet. But here we can see it's very similar to the other two kingdoms at the time, and we just tack on the bling and like these gold belts. They have like all these different symbols tied onto them, and so much symbolism. And basically they were flexing because the Korean peninsula had a ton of gold available. So Shilla is iconically known as like the kingdom of the gold, like the golden kingdom or something. I can't remember the exact phrase, but they're just flexing all over with all the gold because they had so much of it. Like even we're talking like nobles. Nobles would have had like the gold jewelry. They wouldn't have had like probably these really heavy beads and like the really tall crowns, but they might have had maybe some circlets or at least maybe like a belt with the gold plaques on it and a necklace or two. Like you would have blamed yourself out a little bit. You wouldn't have just the king would have just been the more blinged out, the most blinged out. So yeah, and then this is supposed to be queen, king, and then like a princess, I think. So here we go. I'm just gonna someone put together this infographic of how the crowns looked. So Gaya, you can see crowns were a lot shorter. Here's Baekje's crowns. They kind of look more like hats, like the early hats that made it to Japan. And then here you can see when you see Baekje ornamental pieces in museums, you'll see like there's often paired gold decorations, and they're showing here that they were just kind of tucked into the sides of the hats they were wearing. And then they're specifying all these filigrees, and then over here is the Silla gold crowns on a timeline. So we have 5th century going this way, and then coming this way into the beginning of 6th century, and then 6th century into 7th century. So we have crowns. We have tons of those. So if you ever wanted to get really specific on maybe like later or earlier half of a century for crowns, yeah, you can do that because we have tons of those. So there you go. I would assume that the clothing would probably change with it because Tang Dynasty also is not stagnant. Its fashion's kind of like we've got the same objects, but we're changing the cut or we're adding stuff or and stuff like that. So assume that those kind of things are changing as well. And another flex is the Silla crown is not passed on; it is buried with the ruler. So that's why there's so many crowns, is because each ruler just basically had a self-commissioned crown, if I'm recalling correctly. Don't quote me. So anyway, I found a very good furry artist that does historical art too, but I think they're kind of cute. So anyway, so here's Goguryeo represented by a bear, and he's actually done a really good job of showing the extants here. And there is some checkered depictions of Goguryeo that I didn't show you guys, and I didn't have them in my slideshow. But yeah, checkered pants are bomb, and I kind of want some, so I might make an early Goguryeo period depiction. And so we've got the hat, and then these gold filigrees that have survived are in the hat, and then we have the gold belts here, and then we have pictures of warriors here and in some of the hats. So he's gone basically for a generic warrior picture. We have pictures of these instruments and the arrow casings. Same for Baekje. Here he's gone for that kind of center tied look from that mandala. And then we have all the beads, very many beads, and yeah, more belts with all the loopies. This one is, see how it's on a white leather belt with gold, what are they called? Plaques? I can't remember. And then we have a different kind of arrow casing right here, different from Goguryeo, which is kind of using this Han Dynasty style casing. We have an extant Go set. So here's a lacquered Go tray with the 2 boxes and little drawers on the side to hold the pieces. So that's very fun. And then here's what the 2 pieces look like. So he's got it depicted in that. And here is a roof tile, and I believe he's using this roof tile motif as reference for maybe like what some of the pant stamps would have looked like, or putting those motifs into the designs on the pants. Here's Silla, which is a fox, which is also fitting. And here we've got our Roman glass that has made it to Silla Dynasty because they were flexing so much gold. And so here's what this hat looks like, a helm when you don't see it on a head, but it's actually like really tiny, like this. And you can see that he's got the hat on it, and then this piece would have like set on the front tip of that hat. And then we've got earrings galore. We've got bangles, and like I said, Roman glass made it to Silla Dynasty. We have it in the tombs, and so he's got the Roman glass ewer and cups here in the picture. And we have this here as looks like a side dagger, and it has frog fittings on the sides. And then we have Gaya, which iconically really likes deer, and so he made it a deer furry. And so we've got these very, very, very cool crowns, definitely, um, for all of this early period stuff. And yeah. So Shilla Hwarang. Hwarang means flower knights, and it's an iconic. It was basically like this squadron that was formed in Silla Dynasty, and there's so many K-dramas about it, and there's so many like legends about it. Like some people, they were basically described as flower boys, literally translated, and so they were young men who were very attractive, and I believe it was a female queen at the time, the female ruler. So so she was just kind of like, you know what? I'm putting together a group of pretty boys, and they will be my knights. And we're gonna do this under the name of like chivalry. And we'll train them to be good, noble military generals or whatever. So anyway, there's a lot of like, there's apparently like one piece of writing that says they wore makeup like women did, and so K dramas have basically, some of the K dramas have put like this really wacky like full makeup on, but I'm not sure if it's like really actually I think it's just like artistic interpretation, because we don't really have, we it probably would have just been what women were wearing, but I think there was like one modern reproduction or like artistic rendering where they showed like these weird cube shapes, and so they were like, you know what, let's go with it, and they did weird cube shapes on the makeup. So yeah, but because we have like those, this, remember the shoulder patch kind of look from the Goguryeo paintings, we're seeing like that interpreted into even Silla Dynasty stuff. So yeah, and there's a show called Hwarang in it, and I didn't like it, so I didn't finish it, but it had some of my favorite actors in it. But anyway, and so yeah, here's some museum reproductions. They're kind of sticking with like that pink red look with the pheasant feathers, and so this kind of stuff, this is probably more accurate than this, but a lot of dramas depict them with their hair down and flowing, and that is because, let's see if I've got a picture, because of this picture here, which is that last set of the Silla envoy to Tang Dynasty. We had the Tang person, I maybe knew about the Hwarang, and so he drew the Silla envoy with the hair down, even though in this other tomb where a second Silla envoy was depicted, the hair is obviously up. And so it could be that like this is just the artist, what the artist thinks Silla dynasty men looked like all the time. But I don't know if like the hair actually would have been down like that. So anyway, yeah, that's why into perpetuity we always see their hair down for no good reason. So it gets in their face while they're fighting and stuff. So anyway, we are here. So Silla has conquered Baekje and Gaya and has become basically, and Goguryeo, but it went this far north, but past that point they weren't able to uh, conquer very well, and so the remnants of Goguryeo's people kind of went into and joined up with nomadic tribes that are up here and ran a country known as Balhae in Korean. And there's not a lot of known about Balhae, and it's not really like in the forefront of modern reproductions because they they kind of consider it as not quite Korean, and there's a lot of contestation between like, is this Chinese, is this Korean, and so they just kind of let it fall to the side. But I think, and they didn't really have like a heavy tomb culture, so there's like some tombs that you can see some murals, but I haven't found them yet and inserted them in here. But because basically no one else seems to care, I've just kind of put it together in a slide here. But Balhae is the opposing kingdom to unified Silla. So everything was unified in 668, and so for the last basically 300 years of the Silla dynasty is when we have the the more heavy Tang dynasty influence, and but we're assuming that maybe the commoners or lesser nobles would have had definitely more, um, they would have kept the easier or native construction of clothing. What also is something to consider is a lot of people think, oh, they just went to Chang'an, Tang Dynasty's capital, bought some clothes, brought it back. No, that's probably not what was happening. We were probably importing silks, and then they were being sewn at home by local seamstresses and then worn, to whatever preference the local nobles would have had. So even though it was heavily influenced, it's not going to be identical. And so here's some Korean reproductions of some Silla Dynasty stuff that's kind of post Tang Dynasty influence. We have the extants that I have here. These are Korean stone tomb figures, and so you can see we've got that high breastband and then the skirt, and then we still got the long sleeves and all that. And here's another one that's not quite as easily interpretable. And then, but here's a Tang tomb from 701, and then this is a Tang tomb figurine. And so a lot of people are using kind of these examples to interpret Silla dynasty stuff, but it's probably not exactly accurate. And down here, I have this Nara example because this Nara example has that like Banbi look, and then they have it kind of tied at the waist instead, and they've got like it's all like it's hitting the same motifs, but this is like where Japan is kind of starting to be more discernibly Japanese. And so this is kind of like proto-Heian outfits, but since this is late Nara stuff, this might be a good resource to look at to try to construct later Silla or unified Silla outfits. And so these three constructions, they're just the high waistline kind of look, and then that's what we got because we got it here. Here we have some funerary statues at King Wonsong's tomb and at King Sondok's. And so you can see now we do definitely have super long actual drapes on like the official robes. I still haven't figured out if these are like pants or skirts, but seeing as like some of these paintings are just big poofy pants, I'm going to assume pants and then a short official robe. So like the official's robe would have ended here, kind of like they're doing here, and then they would have had long flowy pants. And the military officials would have worn something slightly different. So these are warriors, my bad, warriors, and then these are the officials, so like the people directing the military. And I found one picture of the backside, so you can see that it is these guys have their long sleeves here, and then they have like a breastplate on, and then you turn them around, and they just tied it in the back. Here's that envoy as before. Here's two different reproductions of the guy on the left, where this one tried to literally interpret it with the way it's faded dyed as compared to this here. But this here itself is not directly a picture of the tomb wall. This is an artist copy of the tomb mural. So there could be something lost in transcription there as well. So this person just kind of interpret that literally, but they also scooped the sleeve up, which you can see this one here is just open. And I believe that's probably the more correct interpretation. They left it open and it wouldn't have been sewn shut like this. I believe that is more inaccurate because this closed sleeve didn't show up until much later. Okay, let me take a liquid break. Does anyone need an intermission? Just let me know.
I think as the teacher, it is absolutely your call when you would like to take an intermission and get some water, please.
Okay, well I'm trying to take sips as I go, but if anyone else wants a potty break, then just let me know.
We have another hour and a half left of this class. Please take bathroom breaks and get water.
Yes. So, here we go. Here's more of those figurines from the previous slide here. I put the rest of them here. So you can see the men's robes here, and then the women's are... So the men's robe at this point in time, Tang Dynasty got the round-collared robe in. They got that, I think, Northern Wei, which is like a proto-Mongol dynasty, had the round collar robe, and so that was incorporated into Tang Dynasty fashion after Tang kind of unified the rivaling dynasties in China at the time. So this round collar robe will affect us basically forever into the future. So here's one reproduction. See how it's kind of short and then really the sleeves stop here. But in the extents, all of these are super mega bunched up, and the pig painting here, this is a Japanese painting of a man from Tang Dynasty, and I think it's contemporary, but basically this is, so we're seeing a seam here that's pretty high up, just like these here. So the end part would have been a seamed on thing, but you can see this one didn't, so it's like just kind of to add length probably. And here's like a traveling hood. The extra long sleeves are just a fashion thing. It's mostly a flex to show off how much fabric you have. Um, and so you would just, as a noble, you would be buying all this silk and then just bunch it all up. And so it was both, fashion thing and everyone had to keep up, but also, yeah, you're supposed to be showing off your wealth by flexing how much fabric in your sleeves there is. So everything's gonna have super super long sleeves. I know if you're depicting more of a lower class person in your persona, you could definitely assume that they would have had shorter sleeves, or they would have had something to tie the sleeves up so that it wouldn't or hold them back. Like I'm sure you might have seen. I have a watch on, but you might have seen. So like if I had this super long sleeve, I would bunch it back up here, and then I would get something to wrap around my wrist and tie it so it stays and lets my hand be free. So here you can see this guy's, you just let it kind of flap and cover your hands when you're walking. But then if you actually want to use your hand, you gotta like hold your hand up, shimmy it down. So that's a common misperception. Like, so these sleeves are barely touching each other, but this guy's dressed like an official, and he would have had like the mega long sleeves, and that would be bunched up like this. Okay, doke. So now we're in the dynastic periods. Can you guys? I'm gonna mute that. That's terrible. And I'm gonna up the playback speed. And so here, oop, didn't mean to do that. Let's try that again. Muted and playback speed double. So, I have a video for this map instead, um, because it just kind of shows what is happening in China at the time. So when Goryeo starts, it's the Northern Song Dynasty, and then it collapses as Jin comes in and takes over, and it begins the Southern Song Dynasty. And then um, you can see on the right, and so then the Mongols come in. So that's why this is important, because the Mongol Empire comes in and makes a Goryeo submit just like it does the rest of the continent. But they remained as like a vassal state, and so in this map it shows that Goryeo becomes Yuan dynasty, which is somewhat uh, accurate, but basically they come in with troops and they do press very far, but then I believe it basically the politics in Goryeo were basically just like, yeah, we're bros though, so like stop attacking us and just make us a vassal state. And Yuan dynasty was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then so we have, you can see Goryeo on the map is depicted as like a separate entity now again. And so that's kind of a dynamic you're going to see in the clothing. You're going to see a sudden change when the Yuan dynasty comes to power to wearing very Mongol style clothing. And yeah, basically. And then but we have, as part of this arrangement, Goryeo has to send their basically noble women to become Yuan dynasty princesses. They wouldn't have been the main wife, because the main wife would have been, basically they have to supply women to the Mongol dynasty. And in return, to keep the ties up, the the Korean politicians were not allowed to marry Korean women. They had to, so the king always was given a princess or as his main wife from the Yuan dynasty clan that was in power. So she would be a Mongol clan woman, and then she would be sent down with her retinue to Goryeo and would be the reigning queen. So at this, that shows you how tight knit they were, whether they liked it or not. But there was, a forced proximity there, and yeah. And then they used, as you might know, they used the uh, Goryeo, the Korean Peninsula, as an outpost for their attempted invasion of Japan, which didn't work out. So, but basically, the Goryeo dynasty can be split into two halves. We've got the Song dynasty was kind of like in decline, collapsing, so they just kind of minded their own business. And early Goryeo was like, yeah, we're gonna have a political coup, and like so they had like a whole like they took over the Silla, unified Silla, and Balhae had collapsed by this time, and so Goryeo has now finally united the whole peninsula, and this is kind of when Korean identity starts being formed. And and so they're just kind of doing their own thing. No one in China is kind of bothering them until the Yuan dynasty take over about halfway through this dynasty. And so they didn't change what king was in power necessarily, but as an outside influence, like that changed internally, but it didn't change as like a forced uh, person on top. But but halfway through, they were forced to accept Mongol culture, basically. And so that's why there's a sudden change there in the fashion. And then over time, they're like getting fed up with this, and then they kind of try to revert back to Korean clothing. And so there is like, that's why I'm saying like they have the start of a national identity when it comes to Goryeo. So that way they like know what is Korean, and then they know what is Chinese or Mongol, like Yuan dynasty stuff at this time. Um, but yeah, so heavy Mongol influence, and so Yuan dynasty is 1271. So you can see Goryeo starts at 918, right after the collapse of the unified Silla, and then but it goes till basically 1400. So the Mongol dynasty stuff is that last I can't math. Is that like 200, 100 and a half years ish? So it's just like such an abrupt cultural change. And here, blah, 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 Yuan nobles, yep, as concubines. And so at one point, there is a thing to note where, um, cause like I said, Korean women are going to the capital, I believe it's Beijing, the capital Beijing as um, enslaved women essentially, but they're becoming wives of high power nobles. And at one point, really late, um, what's the word? Late Yuan dynasty, there was a Goryeo queen who was, or wife of the emperor, that was in a position of influence, and like her parents, and she tried to like dabble in politics back in Goryeo, and then she was using her position in Beijing as reason for dabbling in the power in Goryeo. So like she was super influential, and that's around when there might have been like a couple decade long fad of wearing Goryeo style. The term is Goryeo, but and so that's the one of political contention today for people who try to do like, oh, this is an ethnically pure culture here, and this is an ethnically pure culture here, and they have like this one. It's called Han supremacism, but basically Han supremacists modernly are claiming that the very late Goryeo fashion is basically what became um, Joseon fashion later, but that's probably false. And there was probably some give or take. And as people do, if they like a fashion and someone in power is wearing a cool fashion, they might wear it. So it's very possible that Goryeo is an actual thing, but like I said, just beware when you wade into it because it's highly contested. So the other thing is uh, the Imjin War, which we'll get to later, has uh, basically means a lot of Goryeo artifacts have been lost to time or are sitting in a Japanese museum somewhere or a private collection. And so what we do have, I have put together here. So we have a couple mandala paintings, and like I said, so a lot of these are going to be post Yuan dynasty, but as as the Yuan dynasty declined and Koreans were getting fed up with the influence and power, there was kind of like a revival movement of like, let's go back to Korean clothing and Korean things and screw those nobles back in Beijing. So what you can see here, even though this is a late period um, piece, this is like the bottom corner and like the Bodhisattva or Buddha. Oh, I'm trying to remember which. I think it's the water moon Buddha. I don't think it's a Bodhisattva. I don't know my Buddhism that well. But anyway, he's up there in the corner, and then this is the a depiction of a Korean king and queen offering things to him. So these would be highly ritual wear probably if these were real. But again, this is a religious painting. So these two are either in highly like ritualistic wear that you would have only worn for big ceremonies, and you can see how like Song Dynasty kind of stuff it looks, but you still got like some pleated skirts and you've got some feather sleeves here, you got some cloud collars going on. So like this is all super cool and stuff, but mostly what we're looking at is over here. So these would be just the servants that are behind the king and queen. So here we have like a prototype of what a Joseon Hanbok or joguri would look like. So this woman's got a top and a skirt, and you can see it's kind of tied pretty high up. And then the male servants are still just wearing those round collared robes with belts. And then this one's kind of hard to see, so these ones are harder to do. And then to the right of this is just like celestial demons and stuff. So not real people. And then we have this, which is another mandala, and it zooms in. It's like the royal palace mandala, so it shows like a bunch of palace depictions. And then if you zoom in on a balcony, there's a queen here walking in, and it's very Song Dynasty in style. So we've got ruffles on the sleeves, and again, since this is a religious painting, we're kind of assuming that these are more what would have been more a ritualized outfit rather than everyday. And then, but in the back, we have all these women here. And so we have pictures of how they're tying their skirts. And so we could probably be more literal with these. So we've got the long flowing skirts and we've got the sashes over their shoulders still. And then, but we have the skirt being over the top. Whereas in like this painting, the back flap of her top is sticking out. Whereas in these ones, it's more Song Dynasty style inspiration of full pleated sleeve. I don't know. I think we're thinking they're because this one here shows these but as like feathers, and so the feathers here I think would have been because this is the complete sleeve, and then this is just like an attachment around the upper arm. I don't think it's like a separate sleeve edge. But we'll see how some people interpret that in the repros. And so here it could be, yeah, it could be a separate thing, but this is like more of her sleeve down here. So she's got this garment and then she's got this yellow garment underneath. And so I would think this is just attached to the edge of that sleeve, is my theory, but up for interpretation because these are very grainy. And again, this is in Saifukuji, which is a Japanese temple, and they don't have an online collection. But so all we know is there's a late Goryeo mandala called the Royal Palace Mandala in a Japanese temple, and this is like one of the few pictures there is of it. And I believe I pulled this particular one from Wiki. So we have very Song Dynasty style, like knotwork. We've got knotwork down here. So we're taking the sashes, and they're probably decorative sashes, and we're knotting them into cool styles. Now this is a cool rolled edge. So like she's taking the skirt and then rolling the top um, to kind of make a bunched look there. Here's one of the Goryeo tomb things we have. I put it in Korean down here because at the time I was having a crisis. I wasn't sure whether that 11 Shide or Segi meant 11th century or if it meant like 1100s. But the dictionary says it means 11th century. So this would be late 10, like late 1000, like post 1050 CE into early uh, to basically 1150 CE. So theoretically, so if that is being interpreted correctly, that would be early. That would be early Goryeo, pre Yuan dynasty. And so you can see here a very, I heard this described as Taoist, very Taoist in style, where it's kind of like freehand, kind of folk arty. It's not attempting to be realism or anything. So like the style that when you look at this, and this is again is a really deteriorated tomb wall. So this is an artist tracing and copy. Um, so these are dancers, and so we can see that she's still kind of wearing. They're wearing, in my opinion, the belt was worn really low. So I drew a little sketch right here of what I think it would look like. And it's kind of hard to see, but we're still seeing really long sleeves, really bunched up. And we're seeing here things are being crossed. The I drew it crossed this way because that's how it should be, I think, at this time. Because I think at this point in time we've gotten the taboo against crossing it the wrong way, which in the myth is basically that that's how you would wear your clothes when you're buried in your tomb. And so you shouldn't wear your clothes like that while you're living, otherwise it's kind of like bad bad vibes. And so, since these are tombs, I don't know if that's why they're crossed over the other way, because maybe they're like dancing in the afterlife. They're already on the other side of the veil of existence, and so that's why I'm not sure. But like I said, so I drew it this way, but the tomb does show it going the other way. And then we have like a little drum. We've got some headpieces. They're dancing. They're having a great time. And these are women in pants. So note, they are women wearing pants. So that is something that's not necessarily taboo. You can, especially like if you're not like royalty and like in some like high noble outfit, you could just chill in some pants if you're doing like Goryeo era stuff. So here is another tomb mural, one of the two that I know exists. So like this is one tomb, this is from one tomb, and then this is from a different tomb, and this is from the tomb of Pakik, and that is, I'm not exactly sure that where that is on the map, but this is 332 to 398, so very tail end of Goryeo, and you can see a lot of this Yuan dynasty influence in the servants' clothes. So we've got the round collar robe, we've got evidence of the hat, we've got another hat here, we've got definitely a top, and it's over top of the skirt, so we've got a skirt and then a top on the women. And these women have their robes tied the correct way if this image hasn't been flipped on me. And so that's why I'm not sure if there's necessarily a, like, if this is a more Taoist kind of style of painting, that then maybe that would be why they flip it, whereas like the post Yuan one is kind of, I don't know if they were less Taoist necessarily, but so I don't know if that was just like a cultural shift. But anyway, so we can see the robes are crossed the right way here. And we've got a ton of hairstyle options, kind of like a pigtail look, and the men are just probably in a top knot still. Uh, yes, so I don't know if that's a difference from the Korean, but there there is there is that. And here we have some late Goryeo um, extants. We have very few of these, And I pulled these from a lecture that someone else was giving on Hanbok because I had not seen these pictured anywhere else. But these are like this one we think is like an undershirt, I think. It's been a while. And then, but these are only half because they were stored in a relic in a temple as only half, and then along the collar was the well-wishing message, basically. So a noble, probably a noblewoman, um, basically wanted good health for her son, and so she donated half of one of her son's shirts or something, and then wrote the message on the collar, and then they folded that up real tiny and then put it inside a like Buddha statue, and then that statue was sitting in a Buddhist temple, and then only recently, I think in the last 10 years or so, they were taking the statues down and like refurbishing them to make them much nicer, and they realized there was something inside of them. So that's where these came from, basically. So we have, um, they were able to date these between like 1300 and 1350. So sort of not like the tail end, but late Goryeo. And so we would have seen Mongol influence at this time. Yeah, that is sitting right first, then left over if you're wearing it. And then so this one here isn't one of those extants that was found at that time, but um, you can see the collar goes over much further. And I believe in the lecture she said this was in the Chinese style. So I don't really know what that means, but so what we're seeing is like these undershirts, or maybe the underlayers could be in this lower kind of steeper collar with just a very small overlap, whereas um, this overshirt, this probably would have been worn on the most outside version. It has much further reach, and so you get this was found though in a Korean um, context. So even though it looks very similar to what a Chinese woman could have worn as a top, this was definitely worn by a Korean, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Uh, is the extra undershirt folded right to left? Yeah, so yeah, I think I answered that. Basically, these two, their right panel is underneath and their left panel is on top, and that's how it should be. Yes, I had to look down and check on my shirt. So here we go. Here we have some of those repros. So we have the mandala here with the rolled skirt, and a person has interpreted these basically literally. So I don't know if women would have really had skirts this long, or if this is just how they are depicted in art. Like that's the aesthetic flow. And then we have an extent of some Goryeo fabric here. And so they used this when they did this repro, which these two repros are done of this painting in particular, but um, this purple skirt one, this one here, on the fabric, or just like why it's shaped like this. Because I don't know if I think they are literally interpreting this painting, and so they made it curved. And I don't think that's how it would have been. So I think they are this is an example of a repro that was literally interpreting a painting as their only extant. Yeah, yeah, I've talked to Myung-soo about it. But so I'm on the same page as her where I think this is not how it would actually look. I think they're adding the curve because of this painting. This is the extant. And but we can see that we've got our joguri and the front. This is either the front that is really long or an apron. So like this repro here, which is a much older reproduction, is interpreting it with an apron, but I have seen There are garments that exist around this time that have a long front and a short back. So I don't know if this is either a tucked in back or if it's just a really short back and a long front. So I'd probably make it in just a simple flat hem skirt. I would not put this curve on it. I would just make it a wrap skirt and you know, I would probably try to do something fun with the ties here because why wouldn't you? That looks really cool. But yeah, so I would do something like that, and you can see the tie here in the extent. Um, but this one is also just a terrible interpretation because we're kind of, I don't think we would have had this much fluff. As you can see, like the earlier, like where the Song Dynasty kind of silhouette is very thin, whereas this might be looking through it in a lens of the Joseon era chima, which is much poofier, and um, that did have body and like the silhouette of the Joseon style skirt changed a lot. But I think it's probably safer to go with a more flatline kind of skirt shape. I'm reading your comments. A false skirt. So you're thinking this is like an actual interpretation that it would be less hazardous? I mean, because they would be wearing pants under this. So like I said in the beginning, assume undergarments. These would be the outer garments. So they would have an undershirt and pants. A double apron. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think this here in the painting, since we see so little of it, I think it's just supposed to be a trailing skirt. Like it's supposed to be trailing like these are. But because their aprons, I've not seen an apron that's kind of. I mean, I have seen aprons that just kind of go around the whole thing, but it would essentially be a second skirt at that point. And usually when they do that, they want to see the under layer. So you would have you. If I was an artist at that time, I would want to make a point of showing the underlayer skirt rather than just the trailing skirt. So that's my theory. So yeah, Goryeo royalty. I don't have a lot on this. I just basically compiled. Here's an extant I found. Here's the painting from before, the two paintings from before, and here's one more painting. But I think this was posted or painted early. It's either a copy of a Goryeo painting, but it's regarded as a Goryeo painting because it was hopefully a faithful copy. And so here we see another repro where they interpreted it as ruffles, and this one interpreted it as ruffles on both here and here, even though this one looks more like feathers to me. Um, but then the irony here is this couple here is one of the last kings of Goryeo, and like I said, that she would have been a Mongolian wife, and this is what Mongolian women would have worn, and but she apparently married in and was just like chummy buddy buddy with him, and he was like, let's take over Korean culture again, let's be in charge of our own politics again. And she was like, right on, man. And so this painting of them is in a very not Yuan dynasty style, and his robes have basically the same overall shape as like Song Dynasty robes, official robes would have had, in the hat too. And some of her stuff, yes, as well. With like we have the ritual apron back here, where the apron scoops in the front like this, and it's just kind of tied on with like maybe some kind of extra um, waist ornamentation, and we've got cloud collars, which the cloud collars, those are associated with Mongolian things, but they are definitely they were used in Balhae as well. So seeing as Goryeo is kind of incorporating some of the remnant Balhae tribes, I could see that being a native incorporation in. And here's a cloud collar on the queen here as well. So yeah, so even though they are not wearing Mongolian style outfits, the king and queen here are late period. Uh, yeah, here's some artistic interpretations by an artist named Glimja, and you've probably seen her stuff float around. She does a lot of art with Korean stuff. But here you can, it's still art, and a lot of people make literal reproductions based on her art alone. But you're going to want to try and incorporate in like extents and your own interpretation, because it's hard for us to fathom, like, yes, the queen would have married in and would have dressed like this, but then, unless she brought a lifetime's worth of seamstresses and fabric in her retinue, she would have eventually started wearing more Korean style stuff. Um, and then here's a depiction of a very Mongol style outfit. And so this would be what a cholik is, and it's got like the ribbon plating here. And I definitely would accept that people nobles would have worn stuff like this, um, when, especially like if someone from the Yuan dynasty was visiting, they would have been like, oh yeah, we gotta dress up to accept the incoming diplomats. So they would have definitely used very, very Mongol looking stuff when the diplomats came to visit, so they could get on their good side, kind of thing. But I kind of agreed here that this feather-ish stuff. I think if you look at Northern Song Dynasty stuff, you'll see that it's similar, but the feathering technique, I think I've seen more of that in Korean stuff than I have in Chinese-ish stuff. So here we have some. Here's another painting that exists, but this is again a painting of a Goryeo woman, but it was painted in her memoriam right at the end of the period. So like she was alive in Goryeo when the Joseon dynasty's like coup and government takeover happened, and then she passed away in early Joseon. And so this is a memorial painting, or to be put up in a temple for ancestor veneration purposes of her. And so, we're of course there would be like transitional period clothing. It doesn't just magically change. Um, but we're taking this as one, like basically one of our most faithful depictions of a Goryeo woman's outfit. So we've got what looks to be the shirt, we've got an undershirt, and it would have this white skirt, like if that under if that shirt had not it isn't tucked in, it would be long and probably go past her waist, and we probably would see it. So I'm thinking her skirt's tucked in here, and there was apparently a brief trend of backing, of like lining the sleeves in something cool and then pulling it back like this. So you can see a couple reproductions where the sleeves were pulled back. And I think Glimja has a art piece depicting this, but I'm not sure. I don't think I have it in the slideshow. But basically that's what this is. This is the sleeves that are pulled up to show the inside, and then her underrobe's sleeves are here. So I got a bunch of reproductions, but the text sources we have do say that they had long tops and with the skirts underneath. So we see a ton of interpretations of that, but they wouldn't have necessarily been belted because, as you might know from later period Jogori in Joseon, there's not a belt on top. The belt is just not there because you don't you either don't need it, or you would have tied it to your skirt strings and carried stuff that way probably. And then here I have a picture of the Liao. Liao Dynasty people, which geographically they're kind of right there by Korea, but they're a Chinese, technically a Chinese dynasty, but they're nomadic as well mostly, and they're the ones that have a lot of the shaved heads with just like the side. You'll see them just have the side braids. And so here's three. These are women. These are Liao Dynasty women, and you can see the long front ties over the robes though, and then the men are over here in just a round colored robe. So I thought of this when I was seeing stuff like this, or like an artistic interpretation where it was tied over the long robe. So, you can see though that they don't really have a skirt showing through underneath. So I don't know if that's necessarily accurate. Or it could just be like I'd have to zoom in more, but I think there's a slit up the side of those skirts. So they're not exactly these, which some would have slits and some wouldn't. So I don't know exactly how one would do it. But there you go. That's all I could find for that. Here's some men's clothes, and these are the later period ones, like so post Yuan Dynasty. Here's Glimja's art again. Here's some reproductions. See, they're mostly that like they've got the skirt here, and so these two would be called choliks. This is a cholik that is a reproduction of an extant from the 14th century. So, but it's been upsized. So here again, um, there was a Rami Yolson cholik, and it's a reproduction of a piece that was discovered in the storage space of a Buddha statue, and then but it was for like a 15-year-old boy, so it was really small, and so they scaled it up for the reproduction. And then we're seeing like the beginnings of a hat here, but I think they just kind of did their best on the hat. But it would have been about that width, but then it gets really wide really fast. And then here is something that was labeled Goryeo, but it might be more like this outfit rather than um, just a regular Joshmo outfit. And then we do have this here, which is another reproduction of something that was found. So you can see that it's got this double collar look. So I do know that's a thing from late period Goryeo at least. And this garment reproduction has it, but then this one does not, but this one does. And so you can either do it with the double collar, or you can and just leave it like that, or you can add the little white over color on top, which we saw already was a thing in this here. Like you can see they had and that is like a sweat protector basically. You would have just replaced that if you got it dirty. And so that would be like loosely like sewed on so that it would, like, if you once you got it nasty, you just take it off. So you can kind of see it here, but then this one does not have it. So if it would usually be on the outer garment of something. So you can see a little bit of white there, but here they took it all the way down. And so I don't know, since these are all repros, I don't know where they're necessarily getting that from, but you can see here, he doesn't have it. And this is supposedly a period portrait of a man. It could be a copy of a period portrait too, because there's a lot of that. Instead of just preserving the original, they would just have an artist professionally copy it, and then but and then keep the lineage of the painting, but like not. It wouldn't necessarily be the exact one. So here we are. We made it to Joseon. Oh boy. Okay. I'm gonna try to speed through. Basically, Imjin War. Imjin War was Japan. Um, I think Hideyoshi. I can't remember names. I'm bad with names. Was trying to invade and successfully destroyed a ton of stuff. Um, Kids were kidnapped, enslaved, forced into being samurai families and working with military there. They were adopted into noble families. They burnt temples galore, then and stole relics from them because Japan had a real thing for Goryeo Goryeo artifacts. They thought Goryeo pottery was the jam, and so they were like, you know what? We're gonna come in, steal your artisans because we love your art, and we're just gonna kidnap them, bring them back, and make the art at home instead of have to deal with you guys. So that's where a ton of destruction happened. Um, yeah. So this is kind of, and it happened right at the end of the 1500s, so this is a really good cutoff for SCA period. You just basically have to look to see if something was made pre-Imjin or post-Imjin war. And a lot of dramas use costumes from post-Imjin because that's what we have a lot of examples of. We don't have a lot of stuff necessarily of um, super early stuff. That's why Goryeo stuff is so hard to find though, is because um, literally Japan came in and stole it all. It's an issue. So here's women's wear. We have some paintings. So this painting is mid 16th century. It shows women here in the front. You can see their joguris have a red color as like the side, the underarm gusset, and men's stuff I don't think did that. We've only seen it in women's stuff, and they have cloth coverings on their heads incorporated into their outfits here. But we have a joguri and it goes pretty low, and it has a skirt, and then it has a white undershirt is probably what the white is that you're seeing peek through on all these. Here's a got as well, so that's why I have this here. And yes, those are pink. Those are pink robes. I will interpret one of those one day. Um, Here's more. You can see it's basically goes down to their thighs when they're sitting, and they all might have matching headdresses with like the cloth thing that, if you know Myungsu, she recently uh, recreated one, and I take credit for that because I prompted her. So I was like, look at that, look, it existed in these period paintings, and she was like, what? And she made it. So that's it's like that board with a fabric, and then you tie your hair braids over it, and then it can just like flip back. And then these are probably gisang, performing gisang, and so they have like their dance outfits on, and they all have the same like bunny ear look hairstyle thing, and they're serving. But you can see that it's just their chogori, their chima, and then this overrobe with the fronts tied back. Here's some interpretations. Here you can kind of see some are dated, some, well, I think this is the same garment, but one in a very unflattering picture in a case. Um, and we do have evidence of the women's top having, it could have like a fancy brocade in the front here, and then the rest of it being another thing. And then these ones, they're rolling back the sleeves on this one, but this one here, it's just attached to. Like it used to be a separate sleeve underneath, but I think nearing this time period where it's just kind of sewn on, but it used to be a separate sleeve. Here is some pleats that are folded over. That was a very temporary style, and you'll see it right here, 16th century, and it can be pinned down to a specific decade, basically. But basically, these are super long skirts, wrap skirts, and the front section would be permanently sewn upward in this pleat. And it would kind of make this look here, and then it makes a train for the rest of it. So, but this one is kind of pairing it. It's being worn on the waist instead of like at the bust, like we think of stuff being worn, and this one as well is on the waist. Um, and then, but this joguri might be a bit short. I would think it would be longer like this. So anyway, so we have, this is from the tomb of Lady Han at the 1600 mark. Um, and you can see it doesn't have the front pleats like this one does, which is earlier, and it's got that band through the middle. But note, it does not have that front mamian panel like Chinese contemporary garments would have. Here is pictures, and I've got dates. So this is 1520s, this is 1633, and this is 1580. So it kind of goes like this, but this one's just, and these are all super, super wide. Korea still had a ton of fabric at this point in time, so these might look short, but I matched their necks up, so the necks are all the same width. Um, so you can see this here, and you can would be super wide at the bust area, whereas this one here is longer and it's slightly post period, and you can see the shape kind of change here. And one thing that I know Myung-soo points out is the notched front. So these two, they're just straight collars, and then they attach right here, and then but then after that 1600 line, they start kind of notching it. So you want these two, not necessarily this one. And so we have more repros. I never talk like this in my free time. My throat goes dry. We have repros of this gauze chima. This is the extant. It's from 16th century. Here's three different reproductions of that. And basically, decorative gauze skirt. You would just wear it over. And underneath these, you're going to be seeing petticoats and stuff. Here's a reproduction of that Madame Han skirt. And then we have, so under this, you're going to have like a regular chokori, and then this is just like an overcoat. And then here's a picture I included because it's similar to Song Dae-gam's round collar robe that she has done in green. You would basically just wear your regular stuff, and then you would throw on a coat, or you would throw on an official robe over top. I have this here because, can you still see this? I know it opened a new link, but I didn't know if you guys can still see this. Can you see it? Yes, no, before I hit play?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a fashion show that they did of a bunch of these repros, and the camera has been stretched, so it's kind of exaggerated a bit, but here you can see how big, poofy, wide these are. How did they get the skirts to hang full? This is both a combination of stiffness, like using stiff fabrics or starched fabrics, and also of layering. So Ramie would have been used, and Ramie is a really stiff fabric, um, and so you would be seeing a lot of fullness in the skirts. And like I said, the camera's accidentally stretched really wide, so this is even more exaggerated than it would be because these models aren't that wide. But we're showing off wealth with all the width there. And the width of the garments, the width of the sleeves, all of that is to show off wealth. Um, let's see if it goes back on this. Yep, there we go. Okay. So here we have some extents. Here's a wonsam. On this, if you've seen Myung-soo's, it's about, this is I think the extent she used, and it's got a bunch of the side pleating inward, so it's not exactly like the men's garment would have been, and it does have a belt, and it would have been tied around. Where is the tie at the end of the collar tying onto? It is tied on to, let me stand up. Like the men's garment, you have the end of the collar here, and it would have a tie here, and then there would be a tie attached to the main body of the garment. So one would be on the flap, one would be on the body, and you would just tie them together. On men's it would end over here kind of by the armpit, but on uh women's stuff it ends more kind of on the breast area, like more towards the center rather than by the armpit. So so like here, I guess hers is kind of, but with the size of the garments, that might be about where the armpit is. Can you kind of see that? So yeah, you would. This would be. It looks like they're putting it in the middle on this one, but I've seen people put it on. Okay, yeah. So all these repros are putting it at the base of the in between, right here. And these ones, this one has it right here, but these two have lost theirs to time. So this one has it right there at that join. between the collar ending and the body. So that would be where you would put it, and that's kind of where they're putting it here. But yeah, that's about the only place that it's tied because that's the outside visible. Oh, you mean like is there more ties? There is more ties. So you'll have a tie on the um, there would be the tie on the outside that you can see in some sort of pretty color. But if you go to the museums where some of these extants are, they do have pictures of the inside, I think. But there would be another tie in this armpit over here. So there would be an inner tie holding it in, and then there would be the outer tie holding it kind of right here. But I think the inner tie is more towards the armpit. Yes. Well, yes, dual dual armpit ties, but one's on the outside and one's more towards the front, and then the other one's just straight in the armpit, probably in that seam there. Because women's clothing has that side gusset that I don't have a good picture of. This thing. So we've got this seam going on here. So it could be that the outer tie might be around here, but I've seen like on modern stuff, it's just kind of in the middle of the body panel. So I don't know. Not an expert on women's clothing. So anyway, here's the wonsam, and the rank badge here would have either been for a festival or decorative, or it would have been her husband's rank. And then here's the reproduction, and you can see that they took the sleeves and then rolled them up. But knowing the width of these, this is basically going to go down to your elbows, like it does when Myungsu made hers. And then they here's some coats. So we have just kind of this one from the Tomb of Madame Kim, and it's like a quilted jacket she would have just worn over, and you can see how the outer jacket is very shallow. And then the other jackets are just kind of like a regular long joguri, and then you would have worn them like if you didn't have a hat, you would have just worn them over your head like this. And here's the veil of Madame An, which you can see here. And yeah, it was just a veil to because okay, so another thing I forgot, Neo-Confucianism brought in like a ton of conservative thinking during this era. So yes, this is basically because men didn't want their wives going out in public and showing their beauty or whatever. So it was more proper for a woman to wear a veil when she was out in public or cover her hair at least. So like you were supposed to just especially if you were married, you would have covered your hair. Um Early no, because the whole dynastic takeover. So Goryeo um had gotten like super corrupt and like everyone hated all the corruption and there was like people like just regular nobles could walk around with gold earrings, so like there wasn't a lot of um it had just basically gotten out of hand was what the thinking was, and so the set of nobles, these guys were like, let's go back to simplicity and make everyone not be so corrupt and awful. And they took over. They ousted the last Goryeo king and had a political revolution, and then just installed all them and their cronies. So basically, Joseon was founded on Neo-Confucian principles. So yeah, you're kind of out of luck. And then it just kind of like gets more conservative as time goes on, just a bit. And then it's kind of contemporary with Japan's Neo-Confucian wave as well. So yeah, before this, like you would have seen some women wanting to cover their head, and of course, you need like some kind of sun hat sometimes. But like, yeah, the whole like the thing where I mentioned I'm just gonna play this video while I talk. The thing where I mentioned that card, the kind of board thing in those early paintings, like that apparently, according to the encyclopedias, was something that women used to wear to cover their face, and then what made it so racy or controversial and eventually got banned in the sumptuary laws was because Giseng were wearing it flipped up so you could see their face. And so that was a big no-no for all the conservative men. So yeah, so they banned like non-Giseng women from wearing that board not covering their face. So they were like, yeah. Anyway, so there's that, and then let's go to menswear because we got still 30 minutes left. So here's that painting again, where that flap is actually on those women down there. And again, we've got the round collar robe with robes underneath. And then I've got here a painting of King Jungjong, and he reigned 1506 to 1544, and this was painted before he was crowned king. So this is kind of would have been his regular government robe, because he would hold some kind of permission or position before he became a king, because he wasn't expecting to become king, this guy. So he was just like, whoops, I'm king. But here's a portrait of him before he became whoops, I'm king. And then here's some more clips from those paintings. You can see the men have like the flaps here, and they're wearing that pink celebratory robe. Musicians are also wearing probably a pink color, and we're seeing more of the cone shape on that brimmed hat, and it's very a narrow brim. And then here's the government official ones here. Here's another, and this guy is was alive 1450 to 1500 ish. I don't know if that's his birth and death dates, but that's like when they estimate this painting is. And that's him in his official robes as well. And so here's an extant of this. Here's a pink one, which is made out of cotton, and it was dyed pink. And that's what you can see in these paintings here. Apparently, that was like it was both at once a rank in the government system had to wear pink, but also here you can see it's like used in a celebratory context. So this is pink and it's cotton, and this one here is like a silk with the cloud pattern, cloud and treasures pattern. That's what it's called. So it's clouds with like the little treasures are in between the clouds. And I do believe I've seen a place to buy that, but I reached out to them. I haven't seen if they will let me buy it in bulk. Anyways, so this one is back here. It's dated 1572. So you can see this one is is kind of like I said, it's cotton. It's kind of gauzy looking, and it was just kind of a regular Joe Schmo one. So it has like these straighter sleeves, but it's still really wide because here's like a person's neck, and their arm probably would have ended around here or here, but it continues going. Same for these, but you can see this one had a bit of a droop to it. Now you're not seeing these in Chinese garments that are contemporary. You're seeing you're seeing different shapes of the flaps here, and you're seeing a different shape on the sleeves. So here I could assume this is later period, because as the period goes on, so this might be either gray SEA period or post period entirely, but you can see the side flap structure raised up a bit and the sleeve is drooping a bit more. And this one had a cloth belt with it, which I thought was interesting. So you can see this one's lower and not as much drooped. And then here we have that cholik, and we have some extants, and these are this date here is when the person lived, and you can see it's constructed in very, very, very many panels. This one has generally a back flap panel here, and that's for horseback riding purposes. And again, these are super, super wide, so even though they're half sleeves and these are detachable sleeves, that would have hit around someone's mid bicep or elbow. And then the garments underneath that would have been even longer. So this is probably the person's waist, the mannequin's waist, and then this is hips. So the skirt really kind of started kind of low. But if I were to remake stuff, I like stuff higher up, so I'm just gonna budget. So anyway, here's that cholik. We've got the ribbon pleat looking thing here on this one, because this one's even earlier, so it's very similar to that Mongolian style one still. But this one over here does not have that ribbon pleating. And these two are extants or reproductions of the same extant, I believe, but I don't have a picture of the extant. Here, you'll see this one's like a peony fabric, and this is actually transparent. This is gauzy. So you would have something underneath this, like your undershirt, and then this would be a transparent silk brocade. Here is that Jingyong. It's one of those Korean things where the K and the R don't go together. So straight sleeve, no skirt. We can kind of date it based on the way the flaps go. Um, and then oh, I was like, what do I hear? I guess someone's mowing. Um, but this one over here, I put in here because it shows that the sleeve can be similar as this one, which is period. The person died 1550, but instead of having it outward, they just basically folded these in and gathered in the side panels here. But on this one, it's and this is an akjurum, which akjurum literally just means side pleats. So they're basically taking the jikryong and then they're just pleating that in and having it gathered at the sides. And I believe this is one of the, like I said, the conservatism kind of increased over time, and they were like, nah, men don't need to have so many types of clothing. Let's just ban one or two. So there's only like three options, and so a lot of the clothing is all the wealth at the time is expressed in the width of the object and how fancy your fabrics were. But since the conservatism was pretty strong, you wouldn't have been allowed to wear gold. Like your fabric could not have gold in it. It would have been like a solid color, but then maybe there would be a pattern or a brocade in it to show off like fanciness or to be a step above others. This one here is faded, but I believe it was an indigo dye originally. Here I have here's the same fashion show. It's showing, it's titled after the Akjurum, but their Akjurum also had some that were short in the back and they were for riding. So as he turns around here, you can see how wide it is, but you can also see that it's cut off in the back. So there are some Akjurum that are long in the front and short in the back, and the claim is that it's for riding. You would you would wear it for riding. So like that's one of the ones that I'm not sure hung around very long. They might have gotten rid of it. So here's some vest options. Here's an extent, and this is super wide. So again, real life armpits would probably be around here, and then it's supposed to have this much bagginess, and this is 1530 to 1580. But here you can see the person who owned this one was born when this person died. And so this one's probably around 1630s, and that time span you can see the armpits came up closer to the armpit, the actual natural armpit, and we got some longer panels here, and then the sleeves shortened. So if you see something like this, it's really, really, really late gray period, instead of being more in our period, which would have been the wide, baggy, and short. And then here's a quilted one, a reproduction of a quilted one. Here again, here's this one to the left, a reproduction over a cholik. So this is probably sits on a person around this length. It would have been slightly shorter, for writing if it was intended for writing. And then here is more regular long one. And this is the look I generally like going for. And a lot of the repros have really wide collars, and then more modern Joseon stuff would have had a thinner white collar. Here's one of those with detached sleeves, and there was no date on this, but seeing as it has a really narrow armpit, this might be just out of period, but who knows. Here's another one. Here's a double, but it's kind of got the low slope, so you can tell it's earlier in Joseon, and it hasn't gone to the 90-degree slope or the out of period super high winged slope yet. So here's the extent, here's the repro, and here's the dimensions that came with it, but I'm gonna speed through hopefully. Here's someone getting dressed in a repro. Wrong button. Here we go. So this just kind of shows you layers involved. So he's got an undershirt, a pants, boots on already, and he's shows that as the extent, but you can see it's the ribboned choluk there, and you can see they saved on fabric by you don't have to plait it all the way through the part that's going to be covered up anyway, and see how it's sitting on his hips, and it covers almost his whole belly. That's pretty period. And see he's having to pull it up to use his hands. Here's that overrobe. He just showed one that's not quite period, but um, it might be period for his purposes. But ours would be probably a little shorter. It would be higher up, and so you could see more of the robe. And then he's putting a cord belt on, and then you can loop that through a sword if you wanted to, and then you could tie it. And the sword is supposed to go like that. It's supposed to point backwards. And so yeah, I'm just impressed that it can hold the sword's weight, honestly. So anyway, that's that, and then he's got a hat on here, and you can see it's the I don't know about the hat's accuracy, but yeah, you could twist the beads like that, and it would hold it on your head. There you go. So here's more options. Here's an extant tapo, and here's an extant belt. So I don't know if it would have been like that pink thin corded belt like I have on, or like he had on, but this is an extant belt where it's basically a thin band, and these are actually I don't know if they did this in the repro, but there are jewels embedded in this part right here on both tassels. And so that's kind of how you're showing off wealth in Joseon. You're putting it in like the small hidden places because there are sumptuary laws against wearing golds and stuff. Here we have the official robe. This is how you can see how long those sleeves are. And the front is generally shorter than the back, so you can actually walk in them. And you can see that the belt is just, and how wide that front patch is. And that belt is just kind of there for rank and decoration. It is not to hold your pants up. It is definitely not that. And here's some out of period ones. So see how this goes up really high, and then how the sleeves come down and round out so much. Same here. The armpits are really high. That's how you know that that's out of period. Same for this. See how high the skirt got? Even though this is a choluk with detachable sleeves, we've got the super low scoop and then the super high skirt there. Here's some hats I have as pictures. So basically, what you see in K dramas is that flat topped cylinder one, but anything that's going to be an R period is going to be rounder. And here's a felt one for like a military hat. Young men would have just had their hair down in a braid, and then once you're of age, you would wear your hair up in a top knot. And here's the examples, some examples of kind of what I have on, but I have like a really cheap, not accurate version, but it's all I could find this morning. So here's like a later period depiction from Glimja, and you'll see in a lot of museums these hairpins, and she has the hairpin, she calls it a donga, but she has it going in from the top down, so I don't know how that works. But and then there's a pungjam, which I know from wearing my cylinder out of period cylinder shaped hat. That hat sits on top, like on the crown of your head, whereas these period hats sit right here on your brow. So when you're wearing the out of period one, that actually started hurting because the stone beads on the string was pulling it down. And so I can see now why they would need at the top of this thing a little thing here to hold that hat in place, the one that sits on top of your head that's out of period, so that way because I literally had a bruise from wearing one all day in an event. So yeah, you would put this on, you would tie it shut, you would wrap it around there, and then you would use that to hold your top knot in place, and basically that thing's glued to your head, you're not taking it off. um, I know in K dramas they sleep in it, but I don't know if that's period or if that's just because they don't want to take the actor out of that expensive wig and then put on one with their hair down. So who knows? Okay, royalty. You know what? I'm just gonna skip over this. And sewing and construction. Here's some like layouts. So here's that earlier period layout that I was talking about. where there's not a lot of overlap. You just kind of and you can kind of cross it wherever way you wanted. But like as it gets later in period, you want to um, cross it over more. And so this is supposedly like three kingdoms era. This is like uh, I'm trying to remember what that means. Nambokushide. Either way. So this is Joseon, and then this is this is Goryeo, and then this is something in between, but I'm not quite sure what they mean. Maybe they mean like later Silla? I don't know. So we got a lot of colors, and we have like a limited loom width. The loom width what could be pretty wide actually, but a lot of the extents I showed you, those are going to be you're gonna like have to look for seams and then take the extents measurements and then divide it to see kind of what seams they're working with if you wanted to try to replicate that. Here's that Goryeo fabric again. Here's some options for like Joseon fabric that's kind of later, but a lot of these motifs they're pretty usable for like those last few period centuries. Here we go. You can see some geometric patterns, some rondels, and floral patterns and stuff like that. Okay, let's you can unmute now if you want. We've got 15 minutes left technically, but I don't think there something after this class? I'm trying to remember. There it is.
There's a break, and then there's Tang Dynasty
So we kind of
clothing
have
at
till
3.
5-ish.
No, 3 o'clock.
Oh, your time or my time?
3 o'clock Eastern.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. 3 o'clock. I'm Eastern as well. So, okay. Anyone do you have any questions right now?
Yes, I'll get it typed up in a sec.
Okay. You can open mic it. I'm going to kind of browse through some of these pop quiz pictures I had. So this portion are screenshots from K-dramas and
Well,
different periods.
well, this is something I did see in the Joseon era K dramas.
Okay. What was the title?
It was several of them. I can't remember the most recent one. I watched so many of these shows. But what I noticed that they were talking about in the show seems to correlate time period to the onset of the more conservative values. What they talked about in the show is a monetary crisis in Joseon, that they were actually going bankrupt as a country.
Crisis in one of the Goryeo dramas?
No, it was a Joseon era drama.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And that they were starting to tax the wealthy greater amounts, trying to recuperate some of the money that they had pilfered away through underhand deals.
Yes. So one of the theories I heard in that Hanbok lecture I sat in on was one theory for because early Joseon stuff is baggy tent stuff like we saw in that video. But most dramas are using the late Joseon look where they're very slim, and then they have like a poofy skirt. But they don't, so if they were set later period, one of the theories is basically as Joseon's economic state declines, everyone has less fabric and less wealth. So and a lot of the taxes in Korea are paid in fabric. So the nobles used to have all this fabric in early Joseon, but then as later Joseon goes on, people have to start literally scrapping together fabric. So that's one like possibly like an overall theory as to why the silhouette got more body contour, I guess. The other theory is giseng influence, and since giseng are sex workers, they're always it's kind of standard knowledge that they're wearing racier stuff, and so they kind of there's I think there's a whole comedy movie about it that I want to watch, called like The Royal Tailor, and basically it kind of explores that myth of the gisang start wearing super short chogari to show off kind of their bustiness, but then like that fashion catches on outside of the gisang um, population into the regular noble women, and then everyone's like, stop, but then it's fashion and they're doing it anyway. So it's kind of that coupled with the economic decline and everyone having less fabric. So just pop in, turn on your mic, say, I got a question, interrupt me. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm just going to go through some of these pictures. So here's Queen Sondok, which is very iconic, and it's technically in Silla Dynasty, but it's and it's set during one of Silla Dynasty's queens' reigns. And so you can see here they're using all of that gold kind of idea, but it's very historically inaccurate. But you can kind of see they're paying an ode to it in like the colors and the checks. But then they're putting some Ren Fair studs on there, and they've got some like fancy Ren Fair armor outfits. Whereas like this girl in the back actually is probably the most historically accurate of everyone in this picture here. But yeah, we're just throwing everything together, but it's super popular, and so my theory is, sorry, I had a fly. Um, my theory is basically this was such an iconic saguk that all future saguks set in early or pre-Joseon stuff, they just kind of take on this fashion rather than do much historical research. Here's some more pictures of that, and you can see I don't know what these front flaps are or why the those Tang Dynasty like shawls are tucked into this thing, but you can see this and then like these shoulder flaps. It's just all over the place, and but people love this drama. So
wasn't she actually Silla?
this is Silla, yeah, Silla Dynasty.
Yeah.
Queen Sondok. But yeah, so these are all Silla Dynasty outfits. But if I don't know if you were here earlier, but yeah, Silla Dynasty had like a lot of Tang Dynasty influence, and so I'm saying that's where that shawl thing comes from. That shawl thing is iconically kind of Tang, and that's like a point of contention amongst netizens these days. Here's Moon Lovers, Scarlet Heart Yo. Terrible drama in my opinion. I hated it, but I watched it. And I'm including pictures of it here because they're showing these the way the princes would have worn these rondels are probably correct, but they're very slim line, and like we would have had pretty baggy ones here, and the sleeves would have been super long. But you can see here that they're making it so that they're more accessible with their hands. And again, the hair down thing rather than hair up, mostly because viewers like men with long hair, I think, so they just keep with it, and it's easier to hide that horrid wig line when you have the up hairdos. And then the women's outfits are pretty, like this one's okay, but again we're going really thin, way too thin, and we're having these sashes that just don't have tie spots. So you're like, where are they tying this? They don't have. This would have just been like a sash, and you would have just tied it. You wouldn't have had it just disappearing like a belt or an obi. But yeah, again, hair down, no. Hair up, yes. But wigs are fun. And this one is technically uh, in. So I looked up these because I just found pictures of it. I haven't actually seen this one, but this one's setting is reign of Injong, which is technically 1544 to 1545, and but obviously they're using very late period. See how it comes right up to the armpit and curves down, and they're using the mass-produced later Joseon hats, and they're not particularly trying at all. So it's fine. It's a K-drama, but when you're watching these, you have to kind of keep an eye out for that if you're thinking of using these as exact replicas for costumes. This one is the King Loves from 2017. It's technically in Goryeo, but again, we've got this nebulous belt thing that's not tied anywhere. We've got another one here, and we've got another one here, but with a European belt buckle, which I thought was funny. And this here is one of the most egregious use of the hair down thing, because this hat would have been worn with a top knot, but people in dramas, in both Chinese dramas and Korean dramas, they have the hair down all the time with the hat, and I'm just like, why? That's a sin in my mind. And then this is just, he went to a Ren fair and bought this and thought that looked really cool. But again, they're trying to like pay ode to the motifs of red and black for like that Hwarang kind of look. They just kind of assume, ever since that cultural assumption that Hwarang were red and or a knight were red and black, then basically everyone wears red and black. Here's some more. You can see odes to that front flap. You can see all sorts of stuff here. We got high collars, which just don't exist. We got random shoulder flaps. We got these things, which are supposed to be like archery covers, like people who are doing archery are wearing them. But they're putting it here on his official robe for some reason. Here is Kingdom from 2019. This is technically set right at the Imjin War, but as you can see here, they're all wearing it super high in the armpit, and they're wearing the mass-produced later period hats. But I think overall, for seeing a collection of noblemen, they're using pretty decent fabrics, just simple colors. Everyone, like, if you were going out and it was cold out, you would have put your hood on, then you would have put your hat on, and then there would be still this thing underneath the hood. And then you would tie it on and you would go out and grumble about the events in your neighborhood like any old man. So, that's even though this is post period, I think it's accurate to post period. Same here, these are from the same drama. Post period, even though it's set technically tail end of period, but we're seeing really high armpits. We're seeing, I'm not sure this apron, how period this apron is. And we're seeing these weird obi belts. Now we did have some sash ties for military garments, and I'm trying to look into that because I was trying to see if these were accurate, but I think these might be a cinema thing rather than, like, this would be more accurate, just a sash tied in the front. But these kind of things here aren't quite accurate. Here's from Bulasal, ended terribly, but it started out really cool. It was some like Goryeo late, the fall of Goryeo was what these scenes were from, but they're using super goth dark colors because it was kind of a grim dark drama, and this is like a child sacrifice happening right now, but it was stopped by the noble Confucian-minded people, and these are just some peasants being superstitious and silly. But we're seeing some good use of, so here's like a robe, and then if you wanted to wear your regular robe out in public, but you're tired of it getting in the way, you could literally just take it and tuck it into the back of your belt. And then this thing here, I think I just saw on a Northern Song Temple statue thing. So that might actually be an ode to something, but other than that, this is just like a cute crochet project that I would assume is just that. But we're using like obnoxiously ratty looking fabrics, but the cuts on all of these are pretty good. This guy in the corner was from the same drama but a different scene, and I kind of really liked his like, this fabric is atrocious, but I liked how it was kind of a proper head covering over a top knot. Again, if you have questions, just spit them out, and I will hear them. And then this here is my country, the New Age, which is also the same fall of Goryeo setting. So it's it's okay to use that early Joseon, like super early Joseon kind of style, but it's a lot of that's a lot of garment period that we don't have a lot of extents from. So yeah, we've got the square collars here, but again the mysterious sash, tieless sash, obi. But then the peasant wear over here is doing okay. Here we have Hwarang from 2016. This is kind of like the Korean version of Hanfu. It's yeah. It's not quite accurate at all. It's just kind of throwing a bunch of cool elements together and then making a good costume. And so here you could see the back of that sashless obi everyone was wearing, where it's just 2 ties, or 4 ties actually. There would be one on the further back inside, and then the ends would be tied here. So there should be 4 ties if you're doing the sashless obi look, which is completely inaccurate as far as I'm aware. But a lot of people like doing it. Here we have Frozen Flower, another terrible movie. Lots of trigger warnings on that movie, but we've got good use of fabric here. We've got that ruffle collar and good hairstyle, so that's all good. And we got the pleated undersleeves also showing through, so actually um, her outfit's really good. And then kind of same over here. These are, again, with the hair down thing. I know that's just to accommodate wigs or someone's natural hair, because these are all women musicians in here. But yeah, that you're not supposed to have your hair down when you're wearing an official hat. You're supposed to have it all in that top knot if you're wearing men's robes. Same up here. Your hair should be up if you're a married man. And then, but other than that, the fabric is kind of good and the shape is actually not bad. And the royalty would have the shoulder patches because that was a Yuan dynasty thing mostly. Okay, doke. That's my last slide. Yay. Any remaining questions? We made it through 2.5 hours together. If there's no questions, you can feel free to head out, or you can ask me to go back to a previous slide, or and this was recorded, so hopefully I'll get the file and trim it down so it's not so long-winded, and then get it uploaded to YouTube or something is my hope. So yeah. Any questions? If not, I'm gonna go on mute until someone has one, and then I will eat some more of my food because I'm a little hungry. And I know it's gonna be awkward silence, but I'm gonna take a break from talking.